I saw him on the plate, his manhood right there, grilled like suya. That single moment changed my life forever. The sight of it, the realization, was like a punch to the gut. It was the kind of thing you'd hear in ghost stories, or some twisted Nollywood movie, not something you'd ever expect to see in real life. But there it was, unmistakable and horrifying, staring back at me from the plate. My hand trembled as I pushed the food away, trying to keep my stomach from turning. The spicy aroma that had once made my mouth water now filled my nostrils with nausea. My throat tightened, and my vision blurred for a moment. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day in Lagos. The sun had been unforgiving that morning, as it always was. The streets were their usual mix of chaos and life, with vendors shouting over each other, children laughing and chasing one another, and conductors yelling destinations from overcrowded downfalls. It was noisy and alive, the kind of familiar madness that reminded you Lagos never truly slept. Chuka, my childhood friend and perpetual troublemaker, showed up unannounced, as he often did. He banged on my door with his usual enthusiasm, not caring that I hadn't eaten or dressed for the day yet. "Guy, you still dey sleep," he teased as he barged in. "Wake up, Ene. You know hear the gist?" I groaned, pulling my pillow over my face. "Which one again, Chuka? Abeg, leave me. Today no be the day. You dey door. Mama busy don launch one special for her booker. Everybody dey talk am. I swear, you go love am." I knew Chuka well enough to recognize when he wouldn't take no for an answer. He was always the adventurous one, dragging me into situations I didn't ask for but rarely regretted. That's the thing about Chuka, he had this energy, this way of making you feel like missing out wasn't an option. "Fine," I said eventually, dragging myself out of bed. "Make we go." The walk to Mama Busy's was short but felt longer in the sweltering heat. The streets were alive with hawkers balancing trays on their heads, beggars weaving through traffic, and okada's zooming dangerously close to pedestrians. Chuka was his usual self, talking a mile a minute about football, politics, and his latest get-rich-quick idea. When we arrived at the booker, the place was packed. It always was. Mama Busy's food was legendary in the neighborhood. People swore by her nkwobi, her pepper soup, her jollof rice. It was comfort food, the kind that made you feel at home no matter how chaotic Lagos got. The booker itself was modest. Faded posters of old Nollywood movies lined the walls, and the air buzzed with the sound of laughter, conversation, and clinking plates. The aroma of sizzling spices hung in the air, a mouth-watering promise of the meal to come. Mama Busy was behind the counter, as usual, her voice booming as she backed orders at her staff. She was larger than life in every sense of the word, her bright ankara wrapper and geli making her impossible to miss. She had this presence, this warmth that made you feel like she cared about every single person who walked through her doors. "Oh, my boys," she called out when she saw us. "Long time. Wetin una wan chop today?" Chuka grinned. "Mama, you know me now. Your catfish pepper soup, no dey miss." "And you?" she asked, turning to me. I hesitated. I wasn't particularly hungry, but Chuka nudged me. "Order the special, no," he said. "You no go regret am." Mama Busy's smile widened. "You'll love it," she said, her voice full of certainty. The food arrived quickly, as it always did. Chuka dove into his bowl with gusto, singing praises about the taste. But I hesitated. Something about the meat on my plate looked off. The spices coated it perfectly, the scent was intoxicating, but the shape was wrong. I poked at it with my fork, turning it over. My stomach dropped. It wasn't goat meat. It wasn't beef. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. My mind raced as I tried to process what I was looking at. And then it hit me, and my breath caught in my throat. The shape, the size, the texture, it looked human. "Chuka," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Look at this." He frowned, leaning over to see. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to horror. "Guy," he muttered, his voice shaking. "No be wetin I think be this." Before I could answer, someone else shouted. A man at the next table stood up abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. His plate overturned, the contents spilling onto the table. A woman screamed. The entire buka erupted into chaos. People shouted, chairs clattered, and plates crashed to the floor. Some tried to rush out the door, pushing and shoving in their desperation to leave. But amid all the panic, I saw her, Mama Busy. She stood behind the counter, her face calm, her hands folded in front of her. She didn't look confused or scared. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, her eyes scanned the room with an unsettling calm, as if she were watching a scene she had seen play out many times before. Her gaze landed on me, and for a moment, I felt frozen. She smiled, a faint, knowing smile that chilled me to my core. Chuka grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "We need to go," he said, his voice trembling. We stumbled out into the street, the noise of the city hitting us like a wave. But it felt different now. The chaos of Lagos suddenly seemed darker, heavier, like the world had shifted into something more sinister. We ran until we couldn't run anymore, collapsing onto a bench in a small park. My heart was racing, my mind reeling. What just happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Chuka shook his head, his hands trembling. "We have to tell someone," he said. "We can't keep quiet about this." We made our way to the nearest police station, stumbling over our words as we tried to explain what we had seen. At first, the officers didn't believe us. But as more people arrived with similar stories, the disbelief gave way to urgency. The rest of the story unfolded like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The events of that day became the stuff of urban legend, but for those of us who lived through it, there was no escaping the truth. By the time the police arrived at Mama Busy's buka, the crowd outside had grown restless, buzzing with speculation and fear. People who had eaten there for years gathered, whispering to one another, their faces pale with a mix of shock and dread. When the officers emerged from the building, their expressions said it all. The news spread like wildfire, freezers stocked with human body parts, pots of boiling stew filled with meat that wasn't meat at all, and utensils that still dripped with the residue of our crimes. I don't know what possessed Chuka and me to stay there, watching from a distance. Maybe it was morbid curiosity or a need for closure. We stood at the edge of the crowd, our breaths shallow, our bodies tense. Mama Busy was brought out in handcuffs, flanked by officers. Her head was held high, her face calm. She didn't fight, didn't cry, didn't shout. She just walked quietly, her gaze scanning the crowd until it landed on us. That same smile, faint, knowing, curved her lips again. My blood ran cold. "She's not even scared," Chuka muttered, his voice shaking. "Guy, how person go do this kind thing and still dey bold like this?" I didn't have an answer. The days that followed were chaos. The buka was shut down immediately, cordoned off with police tape. The neighborhood buzzed with rumors, each one more horrifying than the last. Some claimed she had been running this operation for years, selling human flesh to unsuspecting customers. Others said she was part of a cult, performing dark rituals to ensure her business thrived. But the worst part was the questions, the nagging, unrelenting questions that kept me awake at night. How long had this been going on? Had I eaten it before? Had Chuka? Had anyone we knew? The thought made my stomach turn every time. The trial was a spectacle. Reporters from every corner of Lagos descended on the courthouse, their cameras flashing as they jostled for space. Mama Busy sat in the dock, her face unreadable, as witness after witness testified against her. Former employees spoke of strange late-night deliveries, of threats to keep their mouths shut, of a freezer in the back that no one was allowed to touch. The evidence was damning. Photos of the crime scene, the grisly contents of her freezers, the receipts for special deliveries that didn't list their source. But through it all, she remained silent, her expression never changing. When the judge finally handed down the sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, the courtroom erupted into cheers. People hugged, cried, and thanked God. But I couldn't celebrate. Neither could Chuka. She still won, he said quietly as we left the courthouse. I frowned, looking at him. How? She made us question everything, he said. Every plate of food, every meal we eat outside now. Guy, this thing no go ever leave our minds. He was right. The community changed after that. People stopped eating out as much, especially at roadside bukas. There was a new wariness in the air, a lingering suspicion that no one could shake. Conversations at parties and gatherings often turned to what happened at Mama Busy's, with people recounting their own experiences, their own fears. I used to eat hankobi every Sunday, one man said at a neighborhood meeting. Now I wonder if I was eating someone's leg. The buka became a ghost story, a cautionary tale told to scare children into being careful. People whispered about it in the markets, at bus stops, in their homes. Some claimed they saw her ghost wandering the streets at night, her girly tight, her hands holding a tray of meat. Others swore they heard her laugh echoing in the distance when the streets were quiet. As for me, I couldn't bring myself to trust food I hadn't cooked. Every time I passed by the old buka, now boarded up and overgrown with weeds, I felt a chill run down my spine. One night, months after the trial, I had a dream, or maybe it was a nightmare. I was back in the buka, sitting at a table. The room was empty, silent, except for the sound of a pot boiling on the stove. Mama Busy appeared from the shadows, her smile wide, her eyes bright. Eat, she said, placing a plate in front of me. I looked down. The plate was empty, but the smell of spices filled the air. I felt her hands on my shoulders, heavy and warm. Eat, she whispered again, her voice soft but insistent. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The dream felt too real, too vivid. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Chuka and I drifted apart after that. He couldn't handle the memories, the constant questions from people who knew we had been there that day. He moved to Port Harcourt, trying to start fresh. I stayed in Lagos, but I was never the same. Sometimes, when I walk through the neighborhood, I hear whispers. Not from people, but from the air itself. A faint laugh carried on the wind, a smell of spices where there should be none. And in those moments, I can't help but wonder, was she just one person, or is there more to this than we'll ever know? The city moves on, as it always does, but some scars never heal.
Did you enjoy the story? If you did, please give us a like, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to comment, let us know what you think about this story, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.